everybody. Welcome back again. I am Leslyn Keith with Lipedema Simplified. I am the Director of Research and President of the Board for Lipedema Project. And we're here again to meet some of the sponsors for our Heart to Heart event that's coming up this April 12, 13, and 14. And right now I am with Phil Yin from SiPhox Health, which it is so wonderful to be here with him. Hi, Phil.
Hi, how's it going, Leslyn? It's great to connect again.
And we were so lucky to connect at the recent Collaborative Science conference put on by Dave Feldman in Las Vegas. And what your company does, Phil, is so tied in to and so perfect for someone doing citizen science, practicing on themselves, trying to find out what's going on, because you guys do stuff with blood testing that people can do in their home.
Yep.
So I would just love for you to tell a little bit about SiPhox.
Yeah, for sure. And, maybe let's start here, which, like I say, it's great to connect with you again. And, let's full disclosure to your community. Like, you and I have actually known each other for basically less than a month, because as you mentioned, we were both fortunate to be part of Dave Feldman's Collaborative Science, the first annual conference he had for his citizen science. And, I've been to a lot of conferences in my life, and I think that was such a unique conference. And honestly, one of the reasons it made it so unique was it was a shared, spotlight, not just on the experts in the field, but on the citizens themselves. And, it wasn't just it wasn't just the fact that I got to actually speak with a lot of individuals in their journeys when they came back to see the SiPhox booth, but they were on stage. And in fact, honestly, that's how I started to learn about lipedema. I'm not afraid to admit how much lack of knowledge I had until about a month ago, and how quickly my knowledge in lipedema has accelerated thanks to you, Lipedema Simplified, and the work that you guys are doing to just kind of educate, not just obviously your clients and your patients and women with lipedema, but obviously individuals like myself who are professionals who honestly just didn't recognize the scope of this problem. So, my point is, like, that was such an amazing conference. And, one of the presentations that made such a profound impact on me was the one that your colleague,
Siobhan Huggins.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Presented just with a lot of case series and case reports, and highlighting the power of nutritional ketosis and what that could have, what an impact that could have. Importantly, first of all, clinically, in terms of how these women felt and how it resolved this almost intractable pain, but also on the biomarkers that have been changed, not just from your organization, but have been done all around the world.
Right.
And, as you and Siobhan highlighted, like, this is a condition that is under the radar, it's underserved, and the solutions, at least historically, have been found to be challenging, which is probably one of the great reasons why this unfortunately has been underserved. But what you guys were doing was tremendous, and what it required is a lot of personalization of care. Importantly, it was about recognizing the importance of lifestyle, in this case, a nutritional intervention, which, again, I don't think has the emphasis that it should in our system today. And I took notes right after that meeting. Like, I've got to talk to Siobhan and this organization. And fortunately for me, you came up to me before, and vice versa, because of what we were doing at SiPhox. And so that's how we made this connection. So let me pause real quick. I've been talking a lot, but one thing I do want to say is, first of all, congratulations and thank you to the work that you guys have done at Lipedema Simplified. Like I say, it's a tremendous resource, and I can already tell that already because of what value that had for me. And SiPhox is absolutely thrilled to be a sponsor of your upcoming virtual event. So that's a good place to start.
And our virtual event is Keto Beyond, customizing your plan to joyful nutrition. And I feel like SiPhox, what you offer, really helps assist the person with customizing their plan. because now they can follow their blood markers. They can have control over that themselves. They can do the test at home. And so this doing this blood testing, I think, is part of being able to customize your nutrition, one part of it. And so what SiPhox offers is pretty unique and I think a wonderful addition to a person's overall healthcare. Can you talk a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe a good place to start, number one, is to let people know a little bit about what this company is, how it was founded and why it was founded, and ultimately, the problem that SiPhox is trying to solve for. And then highlighted that like I say, we actually launched a beta launch, what was called the SiPhox Heart Health Blueprint, which by coincidence is not unlike your title of your upcoming keto conference. Maybe we could talk about that. But we beta launched that at the COSI conference as well. But backing up about SiPhox Health, this is a young company. We've only been around since 2020, literally right before the pandemic, and it was founded by two scientists, Dietrich Vermeulen and Michael Dubrovsky, who are MIT trained scientists, and they've been very successful in advancing this field of photonics, the use of optics in different industries, not necessarily in the healthcare industry. We're talking about data transfer in computers, and how this kind of technology has really revolutionized much of other industries. And I think they were at a point where they had successfully been started companies that have really revolutionized other industries, and they really wanted to figure out this is an opportunity to really try to do something, at least in the healthcare industry, at least somewhere where we could really make a direct impact on people. And what they realized from the technology standpoint is that one thing you could do with it, and it's not just about the photonics piece, but there's a lot of other components, micro fluidics, miniaturizing how you capture biomarkers, et cetera, from the blood, et cetera. But they realized you could miniaturize a lot of the laboratory equipment using this technology. And that's how SiPhox was founded, with this vision that eventually we can, if we could accomplish this, if we can, miniaturize the ability and also make it convenient and accessible for people to do blood testing at home, then we could really change how we're doing healthcare, make it much more proactive, make it much more in the hand of the individuals, and to give them much more, power over their own kind of domain, if you will. At least certainly a lot more information to provide to them when they talk to their healthcare providers. So that was kind of the vision of how SiPhox started. And in a few years, it's been very successful in terms of a few things. Number one, we now have Series A funders, which include a couple of well-known tech investors, Coastal Ventures and Intel Capital, which most people know about Intel when it comes to computers. It shows the interest in a lot of what SiPhox is doing. But ultimately, we've advanced the home diagnostic that I mentioned through the development pipeline in the FDA. So it's research use only, and that's hopefully the future. But in the meantime, like, the bigger vision is this idea of how do you start to democratize, blood testing specifically, or biomarker testing. And that's where they decided, like, one way to do this is, the technology is here, is to come in with this mail-in product. And this is a product that has been on the market. It's actually got thousands of customers as we speak. And we can talk about it. Honestly, before I ever met Mike or Dietrich, I actually was a customer of SiPhox first, and I had used it for like a year, and we can talk about that. But the point is, there's thousands of individuals who are now using this product and the biomarkers that you can test. And it was this idea of, like, how can we just make this much more convenient? And there's a lot of things you kind of have to solve for in order to do that. And we get to that detail. But, before we get into kind of the mail-in product, which I think is something that could be directly valuable to women with lipedema, I think it's, again, what is the challenge that we have in our healthcare system? Let's start at this 40,000-foot view. And to me, I think of a few things. Like, number one of the main challenges is that we have a system where, we think that we're healthy one day, and then something pushes a button, and all of a sudden we're sick, right? And the reality is that's not how it works. There's
Right.
signals, there's biomarkers, there's a lot of things that tell us long before we transition from health to disease. At least I'm speaking more generally, obviously. This is
Right.
particularly with chronic diseases in general.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually a lot of signals that things aren't right in our overall system. The body is a beautiful thing. It can withstand a lot of the stuff that we do to our bodies and our minds, and it puts up with a lot. But a lot of times there's signals that things are going awry sooner than later. And similarly, the opposite is true too. When we do eventually have a condition or a disease, a lot of those same signals can tell us whether or not we're on the right path back, regardless of an intervention, a medicine, a diet, in this case, therapy. Like, if you know what to look for, this is going to help you to understand if you're on the right track or if you need to make some modifications along the way. So again, these are already available, but again, the challenge is, like, we think of it, that health and disease is this dichotomy. In reality, it's this continuum or this spectrum.
Right. Yes.
And and the other thing is, like, related to what I just mentioned is I think there's still this belief that in a lot of chronic disease, it's a one-way street. Like, you go from health to disease. And the reality is, like, if you start to intervene at an earlier stage, the opportunity to reverse this is very real. It's not to say that we can reverse disease, prevent disease. That may or may not be the true. But I do feel very strongly that the earlier you start, the greater chance that you're going to have to be able to make a change. And I think when you start to think about it in that way, you have to start thinking differently about the tools that you have in hand. The tools in large part in medicine today are medicines, which are extremely valuable. I spent my entire career developing drugs with passionate people who really want to make differences in the lives of human beings. But those tools are valuable when we're sick. They're much more valuable, I should say. But when we're healthy, ultimately, the tools that really we should all be paying attention to are the lifestyle changes that we can make, and the use of interventions like ketosis, et cetera.
Right.
And again, before I start talking about SiPhox, again, the one other challenge I would say, not challenge, it gets to where we are with biomarkers. Let's use this term very loosely. I mean, SiPhox, one of the strength that we're trying to solve for is the blood-based biomarkers, but you could use biomarkers quite generally. It can mean a lot of things. It can mean genetic testing. It could mean data that we have from wearables. I have Oura rings and smartwatches. It could be monitors, continuous glucose monitors, ketone meters, glucose meters, lactate meters. All of these are extremely valuable pieces of data. You can get hundreds of blood tests done on you today. You can go to a lot of websites that can test hundreds and hundreds of blood tests. But in the end, it's like you have all this information, and then you're like, what do you do with it, right? And I think that to me is what SiPhox has really thought deeply about, because we're almost like in this, we're at this place where we have almost too much information. In the end, you're trying to interpret this and know what to do. So you have to balance a few things. And number one is you have to understand, like, of the hundreds of different tests and biomarkers that you could be trying to obtain, which ones are the most relevant? Well, honestly, that depends. For each of us, that answer may be very different. But what I do believe is that for many of us, the foundation is very much the same, at least when you're talking about chronic disease. It's about understanding your metabolism. It's understanding chronic inflammation and the causes of that. If you can control it, sometimes you can. A lot of times we can. And, it's understanding hormonal systems, at least at a high enough level, to understand whether or not these things are in the right balance or not. Right. And what SiPhox realizes is, like, you kind of, at least on first pass, you don't have to necessarily test for hundreds of biomarkers, but you just have to test for the right ones, at least to be able to monitor. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you're going from a health to disease state or vice versa. If you're trying to use a dietary intervention or medicine to go from disease to a healthy state, you just have to have the right biomarkers to measure.
Mhm.
The other aspect of this is it's not just about testing biomarkers. Like you could test biomarkers once a year. You test hundreds of biomarkers once a year. But there's two things. Number one, if you have to test them at a frequency that you can actually use them to make decisions. And if you test it once a year, then theoretically you may not be able to use those biomarkers more than once a year to make course corrections at a more frequent basis.
And you would have no idea which interventions you did throughout the year or had which impacts. You have no idea.
Exactly. And to your point, like, do we need to have everything in real time, like a continuous glucose monitor? I wear a continuous glucose monitor. I'm not a diagnosed diabetic, but it's one of the most valuable tools I could recommend to a lot of people, just because of the insights it gives you. But on the other hand, a lot of other biomarkers, unlike glucose, you don't necessarily have to have every minute or, or every 5 seconds, like a continuous glucose monitor does.
Right.
But you to your point, I think I feel like more than once a year is probably the right answer, but
Yes.
it depends. It depends on the patient, depends on what that patient or the individual is trying to accomplish, whether it's, I said, these are the kind of things that, like, there's no fixed answer. But I think this is what SiPhox has been thinking about. And in the end, it's not just about, as I said, which biomarkers. It can't be just one. As important as glucose is, if that's all you test, you're missing a lot of other important information about inflammation, about how your body handles fats and the rest of your other organs, etc. But so you have to try to balance that, the amount, and then ultimately how often you test it. And then I say the final thing is related to that. In the end, is like, if we were all, billionaires looking to be 150 and we had all the resources at our hands, we could test all these things monthly, weekly, whatever we chose, but we're not. And, so cost absolutely has to come into play there. And then the last thing is convenience, which I know is extremely important in your community.
Yes.
Because, a lot of times, a lot of places now you can actually order online and you can get blood draws at central or clinical labs that are it takes, they advertise it takes 5 minutes to get that blood drawn. That may or may not be true, but let's just say it does take 5 minutes to get the blood drawn. But the reality is, like, even in Boston, which you can find these labs fairly close, which is where I'm at, you still got to take time off from work. You got to take time off from your family. You've got to drive.
You got to drive there,
Hope you don't get a parking ticket,
get
right?
it done, and then drive back to where you're going. And for someone who with a chronic illness that may be largely homebound, very difficult, getting around, and mobility is an issue, as it is a lot for our community of people with lipedema and lymphedema. Being able to do this at home and still being able to monitor the certain values of the certain markers that we think are important for that particular condition is huge.
Yeah, and that's like I said, that's how we connected back in at Dave Feldman's conference. It was interesting, and I can talk a little bit about that. This is the kit that it shows what someone can get in their house, and we've launched recently. We beta launched what we call the Heart Health Blueprint. And the Heart Health Blueprint, and I'll show you what's inside the box here in a second, is really, we focused on initially, is what we're trying to solve for here is, we're focused on individuals who are interested in, reducing the risk of cardiovascular events. These are heart attacks, strokes, heart failure. And the reality is, we know that from our customers that that's something they want. But the not funny thing, but the point being, as we've already discussed, when we talk about the pillars of whether it's heart disease or the pillars of lipedema or the pillars of the development of neurodegenerative disease or the pillars of neuropsychiatric disease, they're the same pillars in the most cases. And that's what's so beautiful about, to me, the Heart Health Blueprint program is, even though, again, it originally designed and intended for individuals interested in heart health, it has direct applicability to women with lipedema. And, the biomarkers, and, we don't have to go through every single biomarker, but there's 17 biomarkers and some additional, also some important ratios or scores that are tracked. And I'll just list a few of them so you know what we're talking about. So within this kit, we get the standard lipid panel, the cholesterol, LDL-C, HDL-C, triglycerides, total cholesterol, importantly, biomarkers that are more advanced like ApoB, ApoA. People who are interested in heart health, there's another biomarker that's genetically determined called LP(a) that a lot of people, there's a lot of attention. We offer that. But that's one component of heart health. The component that certainly you and we are also wanting to emphasize is metabolic health. So we also offer within this kit hemoglobin A1C, insulin, we actually added glucose as well. We can do triglyceride to HDL ratio. These are things that some of your communities are well versed in, and others are learning about these biomarkers. But these are the ones that I would say are the 20% that give you 80% of the value.
Right.
I should also mention we look at inflammation with HSCRP.
Yes.
We also, I'm giving myself a thumbs up. I didn't know.
And inflammation is said to be driving the condition of lipedema. And so we definitely, that's something that people with lipedema want to follow.
Exactly. And like you say, it is a big issue in women with lipedema, but the reality is it's a big issue for all of us who have concerns about chronic disease. So again, it's realizing these are separate entities, but in the end, what we should be monitoring is the same. And just to finish off what we tested, because we look at a lot of things, we look at liver function, we look at kidney function, because the body's not just about the heart, it's about the integrated system as a whole.
Yes.
We also look at important hormones, and I know it's important in lipedema, like looking at TSH, which again is not your total thyroid panel, but it's enough to give you, like you said, because ultimately there may be deep dives that different individuals might need to go down. But if you at least have this, and the way this is set up is that you could basically, it's a subscription, so it's $99 a month. You get these panels. You can test them up to monthly. You don't have to, but you have the ability to. All the things that I mentioned are, you get those quarterly, and then there's a sub panel of about 10 biomarkers that if you want to do more frequent up to monthly, you can do those. Those are the biomarkers: inflammation, metabolism, lipids. Those are the kind of things that you might be thinking, like, are these things changing as I'm adjusting, getting more intense with ketosis, or if I backed off because of I was sick or I was on vacation, and you want to see how these biomarkers change. Right. And I think that's what's in this kit. And I'll show you what's inside real quick. I know I'm talking a long time, but real quick, we'll finish up here. This is the kit. You can see it's very small, and within it, you have a couple of bags. Here's the lancets. There's different sizes, so it depends on how thick your fingers are or thin they are, and how much you need it. There's a couple of bags that you basically, it gets mailed to you, and then you place it in these bags, and then you mail them back into the post office, or put it in your mail.
So it's basically, it's not a blood draw where you're taking a vial. It's a couple of drops that you're sending in and getting all this blood work done.
Yeah, exactly. And so you see these two small boxes, not the whole thing. In these two small boxes, you take those little lancets and you put 8 drops of blood total, so 4 in each, approximately. Depends on how big, but usually 4 drops. And then this is lying flat. And then what will happen is the blood will begin to migrate up on here through the capillary action, and that will separate the cells from the plasma. And then once that dries in like an hour, you can send it back and send it to the lab. It will. We partner with just to be very clear, we don't run these lab tests at SiPhox ourselves. We partner for the mail-in test with a CLIA certified third-party lab, and you can have the results back in 3 to 5 business days. So, I think that's that convenience factor that I mentioned is missing when you have to do so.
And what I would like everybody to know, since you're a huge sponsor of our event coming up in April 12, 13, and 14, is that you're going to be providing a discount to all attendees to get this heart health blueprint, and which, as we're discussing, has many of the things that someone with many different chronic diseases, including lipedema, would want to follow as at least a baseline, and then you might have other markers you'd look at. So to be able to do that in your home and to have that wonderful discount, I know this is going to be a huge value to our attendees to the event in April.
Like what? Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it for sure, Leslyn. Like I
Yes.
said, I'm so glad we connected.
Yes, and part of when we're talking about customizing your eating plan, how do I know that I am going from going from my chronic disease in the direction of health? And one of the ways that we can monitor that is through your blood. I mean, and a lot of times, and you're as an MD, you may know this, you might have experienced this, that a patient can tell you, I feel great, but they're not quite convinced until you see that blood work. Am I right?
100%. I'm that way too. And, until I see that, a lot of times, how the patient feels, the person feels, that's the most important thing. But to your point, what reinforces that we're on the right direction, because sometimes it seems challenging, but when we see the benefit and we actually see the results, it really does create another level of motivation.
Yeah. So everybody, please check out the website, SiPhoxHealth.com. And we've had Phil's email up there if you want to contact him directly. Sign up for our event coming up in a virtual event. If you get the premium package, you will have all the replays. So even if you're not available April 12th, 13, and 14 for the entire 3 days, you will have the replays with that premium package. It's going to be such an educational event. And Phil, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that you guys are involved, because this is huge to have this, what your company does, available for our attendees. I think it's absolutely marvelous.
Yeah, you have amazing speakers. I'm looking forward to learning more myself, and importantly, hopefully getting a chance to meet more of your community, which again, is really inspiring.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we'll see everybody there.